If you live in one of 12 disaster-affected states and an IRS letter shows up telling you a balance is due within 21 days, do not assume that deadline automatically applies to you. For many older taxpayers, especially retirees who filed early after storms, floods, or wildfires, that kind of notice has created real confusion before. And now there is an important update. Congress has already changed the law to reduce that exact problem. So tonight, the question is simple. If you are a senior, retiree, or Social Security recipient in one of those states, are you actually required to pay right now, or could you still have more time than the letter seems to say? Here is what is officially confirmed. The IRS announced that disaster victims in 12 states had automatic extensions to file and pay certain federal taxes tied to 2024 disaster declarations. Those states were Alabama, Alaska, California, Florida, Georgia, Kentucky, New Mexico, North Carolina, South Carolina, Tennessee, Virginia, and West Virginia. But this is the first thing viewers need to understand. Not every resident in every one of those states automatically qualified. In several cases, the relief only applied to specific counties, cities, or localities. So this is not a blanket national warning to all seniors in all 12 states. It is a location-based tax relief issue, and whether you are affected depends on your address of record and the exact disaster area involved. Now let's clear up the most misleading part of the headline. The official IRS release was not framed as "the IRS is targeting seniors," and it was not a special crackdown on retirees or Social Security beneficiaries. What the IRS officially said was that eligible disaster area taxpayers had extra time to file and pay. The agency also said that if an affected taxpayer later received a late filing or late payment penalty notice, that taxpayer should call the number on the notice to have the penalty removed. So the real story is not a new tax on seniors, not a lost Social Security benefit, and not a surprise bill sent only to older Americans. The real story is that disaster relief and IRS notice timing have not always lined up clearly, and that mismatch has frightened a lot of people who thought they were suddenly behind. That confusion is not theoretical. It already happened on a large scale. In 2023, the IRS sent special follow-up mailings to taxpayers in California and 7 other disaster-affected states after many people received CP-14 balance due notices that appeared to demand payment within 21 days, even though disaster relief gave those taxpayers more time. The IRS later acknowledged the confusion and said those taxpayers did, in fact, still have the extra time. The follow-up letters were meant to reassure people that they did not need to call just to receive the relief. That matters for seniors because many older Americans do exactly what responsible taxpayers are told to do. They file early, stay organized, and then follow the official postponed due date. The problem was the notice looked more urgent than the real legal deadline. The Taxpayer Advocate Service explained the issue even more directly. It said taxpayers in disaster areas who filed early but planned to pay by the postponed deadline received collection notices with the wrong due date on the front page. In plain English, people who were trying to follow the rules opened a letter that made it sound like they were already late, when, in reality, they were not. The advocate said over 1 million taxpayers in California and 7 other states got caught up in that confusion. If you are over 65 and living on a fixed income, that kind of letter can cause immediate panic. People worry about penalties, interest, collection action, and whether a mistake could affect other parts of their finances. That is exactly why this matters to retirees much more than a normal tax headline might suggest. So what changed? The biggest confirmed rule change is this. The Disaster-Related Extension of Deadlines Act was signed into law on December 26, 2025. According to the Taxpayer Advocate Service and Congress.gov, the new law requires the IRS to treat certain disaster-related postponements as extensions for 2 major purposes. First, it helps protect refund claims. Second, and most important for this video, it changes the timing for certain IRS payment demand notices so they line up with the postponed disaster deadline instead of creating that old pay now confusion. In other words, the law was specifically designed to stop the IRS from sending taxpayers premature demand notices before the disaster relief payment deadline has actually arrived. If this is making sense so far, let me ask you something. Have you or someone in your household received any IRS notice in the past year that seemed more urgent than expected? Here is why that answer matters. There is a huge difference between being in a covered disaster area and simply living in one of the named states. For example, the IRS said the entire states of Alabama, Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, and South Carolina qualified under that 2025 reminder. But in Alaska, only the city and borough of Juneau was listed. In New Mexico, only Chavez County. In Tennessee and Virginia, only specific counties and localities qualified. California relief was tied to Los Angeles County wildfire areas, and West Virginia relief applied only to certain counties. So if someone online says, the IRS sent warning letters to everyone in these 12 states, that is not accurate. For many viewers, the right question is not, do I live in one of those states? The right question is, was my address of record inside the exact federally declared disaster area named by the IRS? And this is where misinformation spreads fast. Some videos make it sound like seniors are about to lose money, face automatic penalties, or see some kind of benefits interruption just because a letter arrived. That is not what the official guidance says. The IRS says if you receive a notice or letter, review it carefully, keep it for your records, and respond only if the notice instructs you to do so. If the letter looks suspicious or the notice number does not match what the IRS says it sends, the IRS says to call 800-829-1040. The agency also warns taxpayers to watch for scams involving threats, demands, or claims that you must act immediately or lose money. So viewers need to separate an authentic IRS notice from a scam, and then separate a real notice from a notice that may not reflect disaster relief correctly. Those are two different problems, and both can affect seniors. In just a moment, I'll explain what would actually need to happen before any penalties could move forward, because this is the part a lot of people are missing. First, if you were covered by a disaster declaration, the IRS says the relief is generally automatic when your address of record is inside the disaster area. Second, if you received a late filing or late payment penalty notice for a due date that falls inside the postponement period, the IRS says to call the number on that notice to have the penalty removed. Third, if you live outside the disaster area but your records are located inside the affected area, or you are assisting with relief through a recognized organization, the IRS says you may still qualify, but you need to contact the agency. For that situation, the IRS lists 866-562-5227. That means a letter alone does not automatically mean you owe immediately. Eligibility, address records, and the disaster timeline all matter before any payment issue is final. So, what should seniors and retirees actually do right now? Step 1. Do not panic pay just because the letter language sounds severe. Step 2. Find the notice number, usually in the upper right corner. Step 3. Verify whether your county or locality was part of the federally declared disaster area tied to that IRS relief window. Step 4. Compare the date on the letter with the official postponed IRS deadline for your area. Step 5. If the notice says you owe and you believe disaster relief applies, call the number on the notice and keep notes of the conversation. And Step 6. Keep every insert that came with the mailing, because older letters sometimes included disaster explanations on later pages or separate cover sheets that were easy to miss. That practical paper trail can matter. Here is the practical timeline viewers need to understand. The original issue became highly visible in 2023 when early filers in disaster areas got confusing balance due notices. In 2024, the taxpayer advocate said the IRS improved the mailing package by adding a disaster cover sheet, but even that still left taxpayers with conflicting dates in the same envelope. Then, on December 26, 2025, the new law was signed to fix the problem more directly by aligning notice timing with the postponed due date. So if you are hearing this story now in 2026, the most important takeaway is that the problem was real, the confusion was documented, and the legal fix has already been enacted. This is not just a rumor from social media, but it is also not a reason to assume every IRS letter today is wrong. The smart move is to verify the notice against the official disaster relief guidance for your area. Let me ask you another question. Did the notice you received mention a balance due, a penalty, or just a general reminder? That distinction can completely change what the letter actually means. It also matters specifically for Social Security recipients because many retirees think any IRS notice could somehow freeze or interfere with their monthly benefits. This story is not about a new Social Security reduction, and it is not about the IRS sending out a new federal benefit clawback only to seniors. It is about tax filing and payment deadlines in disaster situations. Some tax debts can eventually affect federal payments under very different collection rules, but that is not what this update is announcing. The key point is simple. Do not let a vague headline convince you that your Social Security check is suddenly in danger because you live in one of these states. That is exactly how fear-based content spreads online, and it is why verified context matters so much for older viewers. So let's bring this all together clearly. Yes, there were official IRS issues involving confusing payment notices for taxpayers in disaster areas. Yes, the IRS officially identified 12 states connected to automatic filing and payment extensions in 2025, though several involved only certain counties or localities. Yes, seniors could absolutely be affected if they lived in those areas and filed early with a balance due. But no, this was not an official IRS warning campaign aimed specifically at all seniors in all 12 states. And no, it does not mean every retiree who opens an IRS envelope is suddenly late or owes penalties. The truth is more specific than the headline, and that specificity is what protects you. One final point, and this may be the most reassuring part of the entire update. Congress stepped in because this confusion was serious enough to deserve a legal fix. The new law is now on the books. That means the system is supposed to work more clearly going forward than it did when those earlier notices caused panic. For viewers, that does not mean ignore every letter. It means read carefully, verify your location, compare dates, and do not assume the scariest interpretation is the right one. Calm, documented action beats panic every time. And before we wrap up, here is my last question for you. Would it help if this channel kept doing simple, verified updates like this whenever IRS disaster deadlines, Social Security rules, or Medicare changes affect retirees? If this kind of clear, verified update helps you cut through rumors and misleading headlines, consider subscribing. This channel is here to follow the official notices, the actual rule changes, and the real timelines that matter to seniors, retirees, and Social Security beneficiaries. No panic, no politics, and no guesswork. Just the updates you need, explained in plain English when they actually affect your life.